welcome to Mondays with Mom, the podcast where my mom, Leah,
Hi.
and I, Jo, dive into her stories, experiences, and the lessons she's hoping I finally take to heart. My mom has always dreamed of turning her life into a book or a movie, and this podcast is our way of making that dream come true, one episode at a time. Right, Mom?
Right, Joey.
So how are you doing?
Well, I'm getting there. As you know, I've been a bit sick. I caught this weird flu that's going around Athens.
Shame, man.
Yes, so if I do sound a bit nasal, forgive me, but I think I'm substantially better than what I've been.
Well, get well soon.
Thank you. And now, since it's close to Easter,
Well, it's close to Orthodox or Greek Easter.
it's close to both Easters, actually.
Yeah, the Easter has passed.
I know, but it's close to both Easters. So it's close to the end of Catholic Easter and the beginning of Orthodox Easter.
Okay.
So I was thinking about the times that I used to use Easter as an opportunity to ask God for something. Ask God to help me out with something or give me an answer to something. And it reminded me of all the many occasions that I used to ask God for a sign. And I was actually wondering whether God sometimes rolls his eyes at some of my requests.
I think he rolls his eyes at all of my requests.
He probably rolls his eyes at all of mine too, come to think of it. But I'd like to think, to consider myself having evolved, and that over the years that I've gotten, let me just say, slightly better at being able to discern what God is actually telling me. But there definitely are times that I'm less sure. And I think God knows this, and I'm sure he sighs, like one of those really deep sighs, and sometimes realizes that I think he just has to take matters into his own hands. So I do believe that if God really wants you to do something or really wants you not to do something, he will find a way.
Okay.
So one example of this that I think, highlights it for me quite clearly is a time when I was in my early 20s and I had gotten my driver's license and my mom got over herself. So I was finally given a car and I could drive around. And my grandmother asked me to take her grocery shopping. And she wanted to go to her favorite grocery shop, which was a Spar.
I miss Spa.
There are Spars even in Greece, but they're not the same.
They're not the same.
And this particular one, it was quite nice because the guy that owned it had given it his name. So it was called Steve's Spa.
Okay, cute.
And it was round the corner from us. And my grandmother really loved it. And she kind of got to know Steve very well. And he absolutely loved us going there.
With her Gringlish.
With her Gringlish, exactly that. So I said yes to my grandmother, as I always would say yes whenever she asked me to take her anywhere, because as you remember, when I got my driver's license on the second attempt, she's the one that paid for all of it. And she was the one that was nice about it and had said to me, I'm doing all of this, and all I ask is that once in a while, when I ask you to take me somewhere, that you'll put me in the car and take me.
Okay, that's like, an easy request to fulfill.
An easy request. And so I thought, fair enough. And I said, okay, so her and I jumped into my car and I was about to start the car and I somehow flooded the engine.
What does that mean?
So what flooding the engine means is that the spark plugs get soaked in fuel and so they can't spark. But I have absolutely no idea how you flood an engine. And I have absolutely no idea why you flood an engine. I tried to look it up once, and it said that it's people that misuse the choke. But I don't even know what the choke is. I remember a car had a choke, but I've never ever used the choke.
I didn't even know what a choke is in a car.
Well, it's good because cars don't have chokes on the outside the way they used to.
Is this for manual cars? Or both?
That's a good question.
Okay, so we're not car people, so we're just going to go past that.
No, remember we missed when my dad was giving the lesson on
Yeah.
how the car works. We kind of bypassed that. And I think and after smashing a few cars, we generally aren't car people for some reason.
Well, we do name our cars and like our cars.
We do, and we do really look after them.
Yeah.
Well, apparently what happens now with you need the spark plugs to not be covered in fuel so that they can spark and the engine can start. And if you have accidentally somehow gotten too much fuel in your car, I don't know if it's whether you press the gas pedal too much or I have no idea. I don't even know how to do it. But the car engine floods, and then what you've got to do is you leave the car alone for about 20 minutes, and then the fuel evaporates.
Okay, interesting.
Yes. Now, I don't think this happens anymore, but you got to remember this was the 1990s, so I'm really sorry. I'm revealing my age yet again.
Way back in the day.
Way back in the
That's very
day.
depressing to say because I was born in the 90s.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Oh, my word. So anyway, I then went to my sister and asked her, please, can I borrow her car to take Yaya to the shops? And she said, sure, no problem. And so we got into her car, and believe it or not, I managed to flood her engine as well.
Unlucky.
I mean, I've just to put it out there, I have never flooded an engine before that, and I've never flooded an engine since then. But somehow I managed to flood her engine. So by then, approximately 20 minutes had passed, and we went back to my car. And I get in with my grandmother again. So now remember, this is our third attempt. And as I try and start this car, I managed to flood the engine yet again.
Wow.
I mean, what were the chances? So at that point, my grandmother says, look, she said, we're not going. God is telling us not to go. I think she understood God better than I did because I was still going to make one final attempt. And we didn't go. And the weird thing is, or the scary thing is, that evening in the news, Steve's Spa featured, it had an armed robbery at the time that we would have been there.
Wow. Poor Steve.
Poor Steve, and I mean, literally, God protected us because we would have been there at that exact time. 5 armed men came in. They obviously held up everyone in the shop. They took all the money they could from the cash register and then also took all the valuables off any customers that were in the shop.
Yeah, scary.
Very scary. And God protected us, and we managed to avoid that. And I think God made that sign really clear, and we both got it. Mm-hmm. Now, another interesting time where God decided to interfere with cars for my benefit is when I was dating my husband, George. Now, I need to kind of say my current husband, George, because my ex-husband is also George. And to anyone out there who's thinking, oh, wow, she married 2 Georges, I need you guys to know that any woman that marries a Greek man has got 50% chance of him being called George.
That's true.
And if you've watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, then you understand that the remaining 50% is made up of guys called Nick or else Costa, John, and Dimitri.
Yeah, that covers them, I think.
That covers them. So now back to the story. I was dating George, and as my listeners will recall, I was a bit of a nervous dater, especially in the beginning. Since I hadn't dated anybody since I had met and married my first husband, George.
And divorced the first husband.
And divorced him. And when I met George, my current husband, I met him on the first night that I broke my hibernation. Mm-hmm. So up until then, if you remember, I was indoors watching a lot of series, eating a lot of ribs, and the only places I would ever agree to go out to would be my sister's house or my parents' home. But I wouldn't go out anywhere. And the night I met George, that was the very first night that I ventured out. And suddenly I ended up dating a guy again. And after our first date, and I use the word date loosely because if you recall, there were 20 people at that first date. So it wasn't just him and I. It was more like our first
get together.
Our first crowd pleaser. That eventually we started dating, just the 2 of us. And I mean, I was having quite a lot of fun. I was enjoying spending time with George, and we would do things like we would go to the movies, we would go to the theater, we would go to restaurants.
Fancy.
And then I would kiss him goodnight at my security gate, and he would leave. Now, the poor guy had no...
That's like peak romance.
That is peak romance. What can I say?
You know, true South African suburban romance.
Of a very anxious woman. And the poor guy had...
like a Charlotte Bronte kind of like, Jane Austen title.
Okay, we weren't that bad.
Musings of an Anxious Woman.
Oh, that is hysterical.
The love life of an anxious woman.
Maybe that's a good name for the podcast.
Yeah, we're going to rebrand it, guys.
Anyway, the poor guy had no option but to leave because I had explained to him that my home was like a safe zone, which made it a man-free zone.
No boys allowed.
No boys allowed, other than my father, who would come only very occasionally. And as most people would remember, the famous mantra, do we need a man? We don't need a man.
We don't need a man.
So George and I had been dating for a couple of months, and we were enjoying spending time with each other. And every time he would bring me back home, I would actually kiss him goodnight, and off he would go.
How romantic.
Very romantic. So one night we get to my home at around midnight, and I kiss him goodnight at the security door, and off he goes. And I go upstairs because, as you recall, I was in a townhouse, which was a duplex. And I went upstairs and started getting ready for bed, which does take quite a while in my case. And I think I must have been done and ready for bed round about 1:30. So I'm lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, watching some series. And next thing I know, my phone rings.
When a stranger calls.
When a stranger calls, except it wasn't a stranger, it was George. And I look and I think, well, what does George want at this time? He left me, or I left him, an hour and a half before. And by now, he should be asleep as well. Then I wondered, I don't know, does he want to whisper some sweet nothings? He didn't. What he did say to me is because I was asking him, are you okay? And he said, well, I'm not sure. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I'm outside. And I said, what do you mean outside? He said, listen, I'm outside your front gate. And I thought, well, what are you doing there? And he said to me that after we kissed goodnight, which was at midnight, he went back to his car and tried to start his car, and he couldn't. And no, he hadn't flooded his engine. That's my department. What he had done, apparently, is somehow his battery had gone flat. So he said, my car battery's dead. And he said, I have called the AA, which is the equivalent of roadside assistance. And he said, I've been waiting for them for over an hour and a half. And I know you've got this rule that you don't allow people in your home. But please, he said, I'm desperate for a cup of coffee while I'm waiting for these guys to come.
Maybe it was all part of a master plan.
Well, that's what I thought. And up until this day, if I believe George and believe him that this battery actually was flat, then I have to believe that the master plan was put into place.
The big G. God.
Exactly, by the big G. Good one there, Jo.
Thank you.
And so then I can kind of assume that for me, God floods my engines, and for George, God runs his batteries flat.
His car batteries,
His car batteries, definitely. Anyway, so I was left with a tough dilemma. Do I leave this man out in the cold for even longer, or do I bring him in for a cup of coffee? So I did what any good self-respecting woman would do and said, hang on a minute while I get ready, because I thought there's no way I'm going downstairs in my little nightie and my little satin gown. I thought, forget that. I'm going to go downstairs exactly the way I was when I said goodnight to him.
Oh, yeah, so you have to undo your beauty regimen. Like those, have you ever seen those 1950s movies, or not 1950s movies, but people that were in I don't know, those days, where the woman pretends that she just goes to sleep with her makeup, and the husband falls asleep. She quickly gets up, does a face mask, all the other stuff, puts her hair in curlers, and then wakes up before the husband wakes up to put her makeup on again, so that the husband thinks that she slept with her makeup on and all pretty.
That's hysterical. Well, not to that extent, but that's exactly that. I wanted him to think that, I'm still pretty. I didn't want him to see me. We'd just been dating for a couple of months. I wasn't going to let him see me without makeup and wearing my nightie, and plus I thought that would be scandalous.
Ooh, scandalous.
So I decided that I'm going to make myself up, and anybody that knows me will know that I'm not the fastest person at getting ready.
That can attest to that.
There you go.
So can George.
And so George was thinking, while I left him outside and I said, hang on a minute, he kept thinking, he said to me, that this townhouse or this duplex is so deceptively small. Because he said she's disappeared and it's taken her half an hour to come back. So by the time I came back down, it was closer to 2 a.m. The roadside assistants still hadn't arrived.
Did they ever come?
They did actually come. Now that I think about it, they did. I think they arrived at around 3, which gave George just enough time to have a cup of coffee, which he probably absolutely hated because I didn't have fancy filter
Yeah,
coffee.
that's what I was going to say. I said George didn't drink like instant coffee,
No,
which is probably
and-
what we had.
And I wasn't a very...
If you must know, Mom I was going to say back in the day, but that sounds too long ago. Back then, she didn't touch coffee, didn't touch tea, and she'll have another podcast episode where she describes why. I don't think I'll spoil that now because she's told me the story and I think it will sound better coming from her. But she didn't touch the stuff. Not hot, not cold, nothing. So, and it wasn't like a whole like, oh, purity, like I don't like believe in the stuff or like caffeine is bad. No, because as you know, she was drinking other caffeine and other caffeinated beverages. So that wasn't the problem. The problem was she just didn't like the taste for her own reasons.
Of tea or coffee?
Of tea or coffee, especially hot, which is how George obviously drank his coffee. So she was not going to be an expert in like AeroPress, French press,
And there was no...
cold, like or drip coffee. Like, there was none of that.
No, there was none of that. I mean, the fanciest he was going to
Filter
get...
coffee, no way.
He got Nescafe granules.
Yeah. Instant coffee, which George, I say this in a nice way, a coffee snob.
George is definitely a coffee snob.
So he probably, because he liked you so much, Mom, that he was just like drinking it, but probably grimacing every time you turned around.
Well, now I've understood exactly how much George must have liked me. I mean, to drink that coffee.
Yeah.
And he was
Because
waiting.
he also liked coffee black, so there was nothing that would disguise the taste of the granules for someone like him.
That's really true. That's really true. So come to think of it, I mean, the timing of this whole thing was perfect because the roadside assistance arrived at 3, which meant that George and I had a fair amount of time to just sit and chat and get to know each other. And then he had kind of...
He probably wanted to chat, so he didn't drink the coffee.
Oh, that's so funny. I don't believe that. It wasn't that bad. But I think what had finally happened now is we had broken through the no man comes past my security gate barrier. And suddenly here was a man and he had come past the barrier. So once the barrier is broken, then there's no reason to have it anymore. What excuse did I have? Because I used to tell him, this is my safe zone, this is my safe space. Now that no longer existed. A man had broken through and there he was. So thereafter, I allowed him to come and visit occasionally. And George's visits were the best. Jo, you might not remember them, but he would appear. So I would have been at work all day. I'd come home tired, and he would appear and ring the doorbell and come in all pleasant, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with treats, and say, here I am reporting for duty. And,
Cute.
And he would say to me, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to call out the spelling words for homework? Would you like me to begin cooking? Would you like me to set the table? Would you like... And I would think, really? This guy is too good to be true. I kept thinking, wow, I couldn't believe it. And I would look forward to his visits.
Aw, sweet.
And he started coming over quite regularly. In fact, he eventually started coming over every second evening. Because at the same time that I had gotten divorced, George had gotten divorced more or less. And although I had full custody of you and Tina, which meant that you were spending most of your time with me, George and his ex-wife had joint custody. And the way they had decided to split it was they would have children on alternate nights and alternate weekends. So every second night, George would show up. And I would really look forward to those nights. And I remember the one night quite clearly where George had been helping out and we had all had dinner. And I went upstairs and I said to him, okay, you can sit downstairs and watch TV and I'm going to take Jo and Tina upstairs, bath them and get them ready for bed. And I think my children picked up on my bedtime routine. And so by the time I had finished bathing the children and putting them to bed, in fact, they still weren't in bed. They were bathed and wandering around. We kind of sneaked downstairs and realized that George was asleep. He was sleeping on the couch. If you remember, Jo, I looked at you and Tina and said, well, what do we do with him?
I actually don't remember that.
Okay, well, I'd given you 2 options. The one option was, should we let him sleep on the couch and carry on sleeping, or should we wake him up and send him home? And I suspect that you guys also enjoyed having him around at the time because you said, no, don't send him away and don't make him sleep on a couch. We've got this inflatable mattress. How about we inflate the mattress for him and he can sleep on the mattress? Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay. And as you recall, because we didn't have enough money in those days to actually buy a fancy inflatable mattress with an electric pump, ours was manual.
Yeah.
And that took another hour and a half, I'm sure, just to pump this mattress up. George was sleeping happily. We didn't sleep at all. And we managed to pump up this mattress.
Oh, that's so cute of us.
You were very cute.
Thank you.
And didn't sleep ever. But anyway, so we pumped up the mattress and then we went and woke George up and said to him, why don't you, instead of going home, come and sleep on the mattress? And what I need to mention as a side note is I needed Jo and Tina to be very, very clear that George is not going to sleep on a mattress in my room, and so that they get any weird ideas about hanky-panky. George will sleep on the mattress outside your bedrooms so that you can see him sleeping there and know that there he is. So we maneuvered the mattress outside your bedroom, Jo, which was near the bathroom, and poor George, because in those days, guys, honestly, Jo used to wake up 7 or 8 times a night.
This is slander.
She was an absolute nightmare. And every time she would wake up, needless to say, she'd kind of want to go stumbling into my room. She would trip over George, wake him up.
Poor George.
And then the other thing that I didn't mention about our mattress, which was not a very high quality mattress, is that this poor mattress had a slow leak. So what would happen is that George would wake up every morning
On the
and
floor.
on the floor. He would start off on this pumped up air mattress, be trampled on during the night at minimum of 7 times, and then wake up in the morning flat on the floor. The guy felt battered and bruised.
And yet he still came over.
He did. And that's what kind of shocked me. I would look at this and this guy would still come over and be on the floor and wake up literally on the floor. And I kept thinking, there's something going on here. And I thought, possibly either this guy loves
really
me,
loves you, yeah.
or else he needs to be institutionalized and be having electric shock therapy, because how can this guy do it? Eventually, what the poor guy did is he arrived one day and walked in sheepishly, and he had a mattress under his arm. He had gone out and bought his own inflatable mattress, which was, funny enough, do you remember that
It was like a
mattress?
single-person mattress.
It was a single-person
It
mattress.
looked like it was shaped like a coffin.
It was shaped like a coffin, and it was very, very thin.
Yeah.
It was very thin. It was one of these very fancy camping mattresses
Yeah.
where you literally, in order to blow it up, you needed to exhale 3 times gently, and this thing had blown up. And then you would lie on it. And the poor guy, I mean, he was used to being very close to the floor at that point. But he was not very far off the floor. But this mattress was still comfortable.
Yeah, it was.
The only problem with that mattress is that you can't roll or move, because then you're going to roll off it. It was a single mattress for a very, very skinny person.
Or a very still sleeper.
Or a very still sleeper, which I wonder now why George is such a still sleeper. He probably learnt it from those days.
He trained himself.
He trained himself. And then George kept coming back, and the rest of it, as they say, is history.
Yep.
And honestly, if I believe George's story about the battery, then I actually have to believe that God wanted us to be together.
Yeah. Nice.
So it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. And on that note, what have we learned from these stories, Mom?
Well, the first thing I think we've learned is that if your car engine floods or if your car battery dies, it may be a sign from God.
Not necessarily always, but it might be.
It might be. Probably the next thing to consider is that God does communicate in weird and wonderful and mysterious ways.
That he does, and his signs are never really super obvious.
They're not very obvious. The other thing that we've learned is that you should always invest in a very good quality air mattress.
Yeah. One that doesn't leak slowly so that you end up on the floor after a few hours of sleep.
Exactly that. And also, if a coffee connoisseur tolerates your instant coffee and is prepared to sleep on the floor, he might just be into you.
He might just be in love with you.
He might just be in love with you.
Yeah, that's. I think those are some good lessons.
Those are good lessons. And what are we grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful that you didn't end up going to that supermarket, to the spa, and you didn't get held up.
I'm also very grateful for that. I'm grateful that my grandmother insisted that this was God telling us not to go. I'm very grateful that God does intervene.
Yeah.
And sometimes he does make it really, really obvious for people that are a little bit slow like me.
And me.
And I am grateful that George was prepared to hang around for my beauty routine
Yeah.
and that he didn't mind my instant coffee too much.
Yeah. I think those are good things to be grateful
Those
for.
are good. And as always,
obviously, we're both grateful for the podcast, and we're grateful to you guys who listen. And
if you're enjoying the podcast, please remember to subscribe.
On whatever platform you're listening to this on. And join us next week again when we'll have another new story for you guys to enjoy.
And thanks, guys. It's been fun.
And happy Easter to everyone celebrating. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.